Ladies and gentlemen, have AMD provided us some confirmation or maybe some hints that Zen 6 will indeed be compatible with AM5 and you will not need to move to AM6 or whatever the next generation of platform is from the company. Now, a couple of people actually messaged me on Twitter and also got an email about this as well, so thanks to everyone who did let me know about this particular set of comments from AMD to a UK retailer. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, one of the real positives of AM4 was the platform's longevity, and AMD actually have released a number of very interesting processors in the latter portion of the platform's life. If we look at AM5 though, of course it did debut with Ryzen 7000, which of course was based on the Zen 4 microprocessor architecture, and in the latter part of next year, that's going to be 2024 if you're watching this in the future, we will of course expect AMD to release the highly anticipated Zen 5 microprocessor architecture, which will be granite rich. I'm going to assume that's going to be Ryzen 8000, although of course at the moment AMD haven't officially confirmed the name of these CPUs. So the question is, if you are going to adopt Zen 5 and purchase AM5 board, will you be good to go when Zen 6 launches? Well, we're going to be talking about some very interesting comments from AMD in just a moment, right after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by whokeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out whokeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So I first spotted this from, as I said, a couple of folks who linked me a WCCF article, so credit to them for actually initially spotting this. But basically, this is from David McAfee from AMD, who was speaking to a UK retailer, actually one of the biggest retailers I think in the UK, Overclockers UK. So David said, and this is in a question of whether AMD's commitment to support AM5 will continue, it absolutely still stands. I think that we certainly recognise the longevity of the AM4 platform was one of the biggest reasons that led to the success of Ryzen. And we think, and as we think about the future, 2025 and beyond, that decision to move to the next generation of socket is one that's really going to be thought through really carefully. We know the impact that moving to a new socket brings, and we want to stay on AM5 as long as we possibly can. We are firmly committed to 2025 and beyond, and we will see how long that promise does last beyond 2025. So what I want to do now is just bring your attention to the rough time frame of AMD releases for Ryzen CPUs. So if you look at a roadmap, roughly speaking, every 2 years, AMD will release a new major architecture. So let's say Zen 2 to Zen 3, Zen 3 to Zen 4. And again, in the latter part of next year, we're expecting to see Zen 5. I'll call it Q3 for the sake of this discussion. But of course, again, that is not officially confirmed. So, roughly speaking, we can say, well, we're probably looking at 2026 that Zen 6 does release for the desktop. Now, of course, AMD have actually, of course, released a number of very interesting processors for the AM4 socket. In fact, AMD back in 2022, May, and this is courtesy of videocards.com, there's an article, I'll leave a link to it in the video description, but you can see a quick peek here on screen, and AMD did continue, confirms its AM4 platform will continue for many more years to come, and of course they are still A, selling processors, and B, they've even released some new processors which are actually quite of note, and some of them are actually quite interesting and actually pretty cool, especially if you're like a budget gamer and maybe have like an older CPU already, then, you know, there's a lot of value there, especially if you're building like a cheaper gaming system or maybe just like a streaming system, you know, just kind of like, you know, in the living room, that type of thing. AM4 is more than good enough. I mean, it's still a really kick-ass platform. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think that you can actually say, well, these comments specifically will mean that AMD will release Zen 6 on the AM5 platform. Now, from what I've heard, there have been discussions internally between engineers as well as management, and basically there's been a lot of debate whether or not Zen 6 will release on the AM6 platform, or whatever it ends up being called. I mean, it could be called Donald Duck for all I know, or whether it will actually remain on AM5. Now, there are a lot of reasons behind this. Obviously, some of it is PR and marketing, but also there are other considerations as well, like I/O and being able to feed all of the cores. So, the last piece of information I heard from a source who's generally pretty reliable is that this decision seems to have been made, and AMD will be releasing Ryzen 9000, or whatever it ends up being called, Zen 6 we'll call it, on AM6. But ultimately, they may be U-turning on that decision. So, I'm not convinced that this means one thing or the other. They could simply, for AM5, release, a different version of a processor. They will, of course, continue to sell it even when the next generation comes out. So that's just my personal take on this. I think it's, good PR speak, and of course, ultimately, it's not like they're going to abandon it. It's kind of like, well, of course they're going to continue to release new processors, and of course they're going to continue to sell processors, because if you've got a good established user base, not everyone is just going to want to jump onto the new platform. That's just pretty obvious. So I personally wouldn't really take too much away from this, honestly. I personally, and again, I could be wrong, but I personally am expecting Zen 6 to be on a new platform. But ultimately, with this stuff, we're just going to have to wait and see how the chips fall, if you excuse the pun. With that said, take care of yourselves, guys. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.